Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna say.
Hey, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of May 1st in the year 2026. I'm still Michael James, and we're going to bring our first guest on now. As some of you know, we've had a new co-host recently, Ewan Haig, who is a associate dean at DePaul, who I met at the Heartland Cafe years back, and we talked together. He recruited our next guest, the one and only Scott Ogawa, who is a professor of economics at Northwestern University. And he's recently back, I believe, from Hong Kong, where he was teaching for a while. So we thought we'd have a little conversation. Good day to you, Scott.
Hello. Yes, so I'm Scott Ogawa. I teach here at Northwestern. I'm here in my office on the lake here. And yeah, I just taught a 3-week class for actually the School of Education and Social Policy here at Northwestern as a partnership with the Chinese University of Hong Kong, which if you look on a map is not on Hong Kong Island, but up north. It's actually near where those towers tragically burned. Beautiful campus. And I highly recommend Hong Kong in general as a place to visit. It's tons of energy, tons of life, and fascinating place. And I had a great trip, and I feel like I learned a ton. And happy to talk about it, Michael. It's funny, I have both opinions about Mao and modernity in general, and then also the specifics of the current state of China.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing that. Why don't you start by talking a little bit about Hong Kong? We have another friend who's been on the show, Jefferson Mock, who is from Hong Kong. So he's been bending my ear a lot.
Yeah.
A little critical of Mao.
Yep.
Yep. But I'd love to hear what you were teaching over there, what the students were like, and your impressions of Hong Kong in these days of really things up for grab about where things are going.
Yeah. So the students I have actually, I think, are good students. They're paying a lot of money to be in this program. It's a joint program where they learn in Hong Kong from the Chinese University of Hong Kong as master's students, and then they come for 2 terms and take courses here at Northwestern. So they come to the U.S. and they sort of get a dual degree from both universities, and it's all in English.
Are they citizens of Hong Kong, or are they?
No. So it's actually, the program is open to everybody. But it is, the vast majority are mainland China. There were maybe a couple students who had done their undergrad in Hong Kong, but even they were the exception. The vast majority had done their undergrad in mainland China. There was a couple, one from Australia, one from the US. I think there was someone from Italy previously, but that is the exception. The bulk of it is mainland Chinese students.
Well, tell me what they're like, these kids.
Yeah, so they're all, I think they're anxious like but probably even more so than American students, anxious about getting jobs, finding employment, and sort of white collar employment. And I think it's hard in China. And I think there's a sense that the sort of narrative seems to be there's a glut of highly educated people and too few jobs in China. Exactly how much that's true, I'm not actually fully aware, but I feel like it's the same anxiety that our students feel, but probably even more so. When I say our students, just U.S. college students.
Well, what do you teach them, Scott? What were you teaching?
I teach economic policy, sort of core stuff. I don't think that's anything. It's a master's in economic and social policy, and I teach economic policy. And it's funny, in terms of Mao, I'm not a fan of Mao. One of my favorite intellectuals is Steven Pinker. And I'm not sure if it was his point or he was just quoting someone else, but the greatest thing to happen in terms of human prosperity in the 20th century is that Mao died. So basically, who knows what Mao was like as a person, but his economic ideas were just atrocious in terms of actually bringing any sort of prosperity to people. And so his death was key, and then there were reforms that took place. And actually, I just learned about, I think it's Xiaogong village is this sort of legend of where they first agreed to potentially face execution for privatizing land among like the 30 families. And there's this famous document that is actually celebrated by the Chinese, the Communist Party. You can find it in Beijing in like the National Museum, where they all put their blood thumbprint in blood on their name saying, we'll take care of your children if you're executed because this document is discovered, committing to that. And we're basically going to divide up the land into private lots, and then you'll farm your own land, and you get to keep any excess after paying the quota to the government. Because previously that was like against the rules to do it that way. And apparently productivity the following year went up fivefold. That's the legend, at least. There's a fivefold increase.
So basically what you're saying is that after the communists took power in the 40s, and they secured all the land for the state.
Yep.
This is about giving it back to people if they sign it away, or no?
No. I think the land, I don't know, throughout this whole process, I don't think the land ever really belonged to the people, but it was like, there's something about that you had to sort of collectively farm it, and you weren't allowed to sort of profit off of your own personal land. And so you had to operate in these collectives that were like these families, and there was like voting rights within the family, and there was like, they paid taxes in the form of quotas, food quotas to the central government. I don't know all the details there, and I'm sure they changed. But it was really strict about this idea that you couldn't sort of have your own land, and if you made an excess amount, that you could retain it as personal profit. And I think this was partly, I don't know how much was Mao specifically, but this, after he died, people realized how just terrible this general system was, because people just were not efficiently using land or working hard. I don't know, again, all the details. This group decided to go against this, I guess, face execution. That's the sort of legend. That's why they had to agree to do this, so that they could take care of each other's children if they were caught. And then their yields went up fivefold. And then somehow Deng, I think that was his name, Deng, who is now in charge, discovered this, or part of it, and then they sort of embraced it and said, we're listening, we need to change things. So that was like the land reforms. So that's this is a rare case actually where China celebrates this moment in history, because it was sort of a success. And like the economist, Western capitalist defender of myself sort of says, it's institutional details of how things are set up that matter. And this little detail of how things are set up was literally the cause of a lot of low food production in China. And once you privatized and allowed profit to drive decisions, it boosted, in this case, food, but later on wealth and prosperity and all sorts of other forms other than just food production.
Just so listeners and viewers know, we started talking about Mao because just before we started, I told Scott that I had the Heartland Cafe for 36 years, and we had a big poster of Mao on the beach hanging up there. So that's why we got into Mao. So, Scott, tell me what your sense is of the economy, both in Hong Kong and in China. Where's it going?
So
what are the contradictions and the problems?
Yep. I kind of want to talk about the politics, which none of these things I know that well. I don't know if anyone can truly understand, given all the secrecy. My sense of the economy is that it's doing well in Hong Kong. I think there's a trade-off from people I talked to. They were sort of Western, sort of elite business people, not like elite, but like friends of friends that I met who have kids in private school and are part of the sort of English-speaking group, which is also very interesting culturally, how separate they are. They've always been separate and they continue to be separate. That's also very interesting. I met a group of high school students born and raised in Hong Kong, did not speak any Cantonese whatsoever, maybe learned some Mandarin, but were English speaking and planned to go to school in the West. And that's a whole community. So talking to people like their parents, there was a whole flight to Singapore, especially after the crackdown 10 years ago on the protests. And I think that's harmed the economy. But I think on the flip side, it's now so much more integrated to China. So there's kind of a trade-off, is my sense, that on the one hand, it's lost some of its connection to the West, but not completely. There's still, but then on the flip side, it's more highly integrated to China, which is a large economy, a large market. And I think this has boosted wealth. And so I think there's that sort of trade-off. Overall, the city runs amazingly well. Also politically, I think they've cracked down so hard on everything. Crime is a zero issue. There are absolutely no, the streets are just clean. I don't know where all, the kind of issues that a lot of urban centers around the world face do not exist in this otherwise super vibrant city with unbelievable public transit, which is the other thing I think China gets really well right now. Hong Kong and the rest of mainland China, just public infrastructure, both bridges, rail lines, the running of buses, just really works well in a way that makes the U.S. seem just way behind.
Well, we are behind on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I probably want to ask you that too. What's your sense of U.S. versus China? We used to have U.S.-China friendship committees. And people were working for more unity. There's certainly a lot of students from China coming over here. Things are different now with Trump. And, I do see these reports about China, not only infrastructure, but solar energy and making a lot of forward steps while we seem to be taking 3 steps backwards. What's your basic take on that?
My basic take is, yes, they do certain things right. Yes, I think this group of students I taught and some of the Chinese people I talked to, the sort of nationalistic, I wouldn't say hardcore nationalism, but the kind of baseline nationalism that is typical of people from every country around the world definitely exists. The pride in China doing well, just like the pride in the U.S. doing well by so many Americans on both sides. That's real. Also, big topic is Taiwan. That's real. That's not propaganda. That's a deep-seated. That also something that teaching this program taught me is that is not some sort of top-down propaganda that comes from bottom up. There's pride in it. China does a lot well. Overall, though, I think would I bet on China or the U.S. for the next century? I still would very much go for the U.S. Or the West. I think the biggest issue China faces is they are not a brutal dictatorship, but an absolute dictatorship, I think is my sense. Actually, there's a term in economics called the benevolent dictator sometimes.
Too many of them.
So, and I would say, I used to think actually that dictatorship, you just got lucky or unlucky. And maybe if you're like Oman or Morocco, you got lucky. But if you're, Syria, you got unlucky with your brutal dictator. And then Singapore would be the ultimate example of like an extremely competent dictatorship. But now I'm coming to appreciate dictatorship per se is very repressive, and the Chinese dictatorship is very repressive. I don't think they're executing people, but I do, from what I've learned, the students I teach, they are not free to speak their mind on certain specific topics relating to power. And you said you taught a class called Overthrowing the Government. That's the exact kind of class that absolutely 100%, no joke, you cannot even sniff it, even mentioning teaching a class like that if you're living under.
Actually, it wasn't. I did talk about in my period of trying to overthrow the government, but my class was activists and activism since 19.
That kind of class. If you were living in the equivalent China, my understanding is you'd quickly get contacted by authorities unless you were extremely apologetic and were able to talk your way out of it. That's it. You're sweeping floors for the rest of your life if you're lucky. Otherwise, you're out of a job and you're blacklisted on every type of employment. So you can, and everyone senses that, they know it. Another thing that's amazing is that when you have a critical mass of these students, I think they can speak their mind privately. I sense this when I was talking one-on-one, it's fine. They're not, and I don't have anything to fear also. Like worst case, I don't get asked back to teach because some call gets made, but I think that could happen. But for them, if they, in a public place, i.e. among each other, say certain things that challenge, and to know, and what the rules are is the other thing I learned. Everyone knows the rules because everybody has to take a class now called Xi Ping Thought, something like this. It's a required course in undergrad for every single mainland Chinese student. And it basically sets the rules on what you can say, and it's a chance to just be clear that you're not going to speak up against certain. That's my cynical, but I think so. It's a form of control, and it's real, man, and it's a thing. And so, their trains run on time. And part of the narrative too, in terms of the benevolent part, I think my sense is the Communist Party is really doing a good job. They're trying to deliver for their people, and they succeed in certain ways. but freedom is not. And I think it's going to hold them back in the end. I think that's really clear too. You're not going to be on the frontier of AI or the next great thing. You're always going to be following.
Well, we'll see what happens. What comes down. Let's switch gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that you and Haig co-host and your friend, you play soccer with him, told me that you've taken a liking to rugby, and you have a theory on sports as it relates to economics. So
this is a case where, So I will fully admit this is, I think, AI has been amazing for this. I've gone down the rabbit hole of sort of, because I got really into rugby, a sport I had never attended. Apparently you played briefly. I played
in the spring of 1964. I was on a Midwest rugby club that toured. Amazing. We played Duke. We played Fordham. It was people from University of Chicago, people from South Africa, and Palmer College of Chiropractic.
So I attended the Rugby Sevens tournament in Hong Kong, which is apparently the premier Rugby Sevens and like one of the big sporting events in Hong Kong. But the fact, it was nice. The stadium's a nice new stadium, sort of Western style, just modern, brand new stadium. But honestly, that also showed me just that that's the frontier. It was like half full. I definitely get that you realize just how far ahead to it was like equivalent to like maybe a mid-level college football game. But nothing like going to a pro US sport in terms of just infrastructure and the quality of the production and the crowds and everything. And this was like the premier sporting event for the year in Hong Kong, one of the premier cities in Asia. So it really gave perspective on how far ahead, if you want to count it that, sort of mass entertainment in this form is in the West. But I really got into, I'm loving rugby. I definitely wanted to, Chicago has actually the best US rugby team, I learned. And we're going to be hosting the World Cup for regular rugby union in 2031, which I'm excited for.
What's your theory?
My theory is that the pithy short statement, can't prove it. Sports is a British invention. Full stop. Sports is a British invention. And that basically everyone's copied it since then. And it also relates in terms of great power dynamics. The Russians and the Chinese and whatever, the Iranians, they all hate the West. They don't drive on the left like the British do. They don't speak English like the British do. But they play nothing but British sports. Full stop. That sports is the ultimate, we don't even realize it, but everything is English speaking and is probably all copied. It all happened in sort of the mid 1800s to late 1800s. Everyone copied, and that's everything that we all spend our time on, and we don't even realize it. And so just to be clear what I mean by that, there are other sports, but all the other ones are American, or ice hockey's Canadian, a few Australian. They're all English speaking. There's a few exceptions. And the main reason I can't prove this is it could just be that England was the first place to have the right conditions of a middle class. This is sort of getting the economics of a sort of middle class with a weekend that had time to do sports in the school system. So you can't disprove that they just came first and then, right? But I'm going to claim the stronger claim, which I could never prove, is that cricket and rugby really were the first to sort of codify a set of rules that were sort of sports as we conceive them. And everything has been copying that since. Just to be clear, here's a summary of sports. And I'm going to claim this is as I go down, the sports get ever more obscure in terms of where and when a sport was first codified as, and someone actually wrote down the rules and called it a sport. Okay. Ready? Soccer. Where was it invented? In London in 1863. Okay. Cricket was the original, London in 1744. Basketball, Springfield, Massachusetts in 1892. I'll claim that's just copying. It was a PE teacher copying. Also volleyball, also Massachusetts, 1890s. Both volleyball and basketball were different physical ed teachers in Massachusetts in the 1890s. Field hockey was London in 1876. Table tennis, London, 1926. Badminton, very popular in Asia, like table tennis. Bath, UK, 1877. Baseball and softball were derivatives of cricket formed in the US. Rugby union, rugby league, all in England. American football obviously is American. Handball is the exception. The exception, Denmark, not that far from England. Okay, born in 1906. Then you really get into obscure sports. You got to get to kabaddi, which is a wrestling game played in India, but also in India under Imperial Britain. The rules were written down in 1923. Okay, so that the exception is something in Imperial India. So I'm just going to claim it was an absolutely British influence, all of it. So that's my bold claim. And even in China, basketball, soccer, these are the most popular sports. Table tennis, badminton, all English.
Well, we got to probably dig deep. I mean, I would think that not too far after cavemen came and did their thing, they were playing some kind of games.
Yeah, so that's the part. Greek Olympics, also lacrosse. You might have thought about lacrosse. I'm going to claim these are basically myths. They're just kind of myths that we told. The modern form, actually, Modern Olympics was a French guy who was obsessed with English school systems. He traveled to England and he said, let's do this. Let's form the Olympics. He was French, so it doesn't quite fit my mold. But he was copying the British and he sort of learned about. So there's a history of like military competitions, sort of athletic feats, right? And activities like surfing or whatnot. But this whole notion that we're going to like have this like non-violent, systematic competition for fun and just do it as an activity is started in one place in the world and basically it all flowed from there, and it's absolutely global.
All right, that's good. Well,
so, okay. I would love if anyone's listening to this and wants to weigh in to counter that argument. I would love to hear it, but that's my bold claim. Okay,
why
cool.
Don't you tell people your email where they could send you their
sogawa at Gmail. Sogawa at Gmail. SOGAWA at Gmail. So great. Well, for anyone listening who wants to contest that, that's more of a conversation starter than meant to be a definitive hypothesis.
Well, I might go to one of the soccer games where you and Ewan are playing, and